to not have the conversation and hand them the repair order and let them deal with what they're looking at is unfortunately commonplace. And all you have to do as a service manager, service director, fixed ops, or general manager is watch. You watch after delivery process towards the end of the day, and you see paperwork being handed out and no conversation about the MPI. And by the way, MPIs today are electronically done, right? Where they sent them to their cell phone. That's great. But I want to have the conversation. I want to pull that up and say, here's what we sent you earlier. Let's talk about it, and have the customer pull up their phone, click on the MPI one more time, and now let's walk through these cautions.
Welcome to the Strategy with Jason podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Golden Wrench Podcast, where I get to talk to anybody and, frankly, everybody I want to talk to when it comes to the fixed op side of the business. And boy, do I have a guest for you today. We're talking just a wealth of information and knowledge and passion for our industry. So I'm going to really excited about getting into today's topics. But hey, we can't make really cool content like this without our sponsors. And here's a quick message from our sponsor.
For years, I've been saying that you have to process your way to profitability, and no one knows that better than the folks at Repair 360. You all know how important it is to have a fast, streamlined used car reconditioning process. Remember, time kills profit. Getting a used car frontline ready in less time while providing transparent communication between departments is what Repair 360 is all about. With Repair 360's automated used car recon manager, you will drive recon times down while giving sales the visibility they need to stop complaining. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding about that part. Anyways, you have to check out their website at repair360.com and see how they can revolutionize your reconditioning process.
All right, guys. I have a guest, and I'm so excited for this. I got the one. I got the only. I've been told by his friends he's famous. All right. I have Don Andres with me. Don, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Great, Jason. That's an intro. I want to meet that guy.
You want to meet the guy that told me that? Yeah. No, I heard it through the grapevine. I did.
No, that's great. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invite. And I am shocked and amazed at the amount of podcasts that you've produced in the last years. Incredible.
Just a few. I know. It is kind of cool. My team did just recently tell me, like, in the last month, they're like, hey, just so you know, it was just before Digital Dealer. They were telling me, like, just so you know, like, we've just hit over the 1,500 episode mark. And I was like, wow, okay, that's cool. But you know, it's funny. It's like, I can't even like comprehend that there's been 1,500 episodes. Like, that's actually kind of crazy to think. But I appreciate you taking the time to come jam with me today. I am so looking forward to getting into our topics. These topics couldn't be more timely, honestly, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
They really couldn't be more timely. And you know, just like, I love that. I got to be honest with you, Don. I really love this time in our industry when things started to contract. You know what I mean? Like, when you're like, you were a GM, you've seen on the variable side, when things start to contract, I feel like you really kind of see that cream rise to the top of like who the real operators are, and the ones that may have just kind of gotten away, maybe because of their brand or their location or something like that. You know, anyways, here's what I want to do, Don. I love kicking off these podcasts with an origin story, because I'm fundamentally fascinated. 1,500 episodes. I still find it fun to listen to how people just decided to get into this business or fell into this business. So let's start there, Don. How did you get started in this crazy little world we call the automotive industry?
So I got to go back to Detroit, 1979. I'm dating my gal that I met in high school that ultimately became my wife. And her dad's, I was looking for a job. I had come out of community college. And he goes, well, I got a job for you. And so he introduced me to a dealership down in Detroit. He was a service manager, needed a service writer. And this is in 1979. And in those days, the techs were paid 50-50. They really did run the show. And our job was strictly to get the cars written up and to sell the work. So it was a great opportunity for me to learn the business. But yeah, it was dating the service manager's daughter that ultimately became my wife, and I think we celebrated 44 years.
So fundamentally, you can blame your wife for this.
It's
right?
true.
Like that's what you're saying here. It sounds like we're like it's her fault that you got suckered into the business, right? No.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're marrying such a or dating such a beautiful gal, you do anything she asks, right? 100%. You do anything she asks.
That's awesome.
And you're going to do anything to please that dad, right?
Right? Of course, man. Oh, so 1979, man. Like, God, that would be fun. I'm just trying to think, like, some of the cars that would be coming in for service would be like some of my favorite cars of all times. I mean, you must have seen, dude, that's like the era. That's the big block era. I mean, everything coming in must just have been huge and long and loud, right? Was it?
Yeah, you're exactly right. These were big machines, and it was a great transition because so that was down in Detroit. We ended up moving out to the Troy Motor Mall in 1980, and that was a dramatic difference from being down in the economically challenged area of Detroit. They weren't selling many vehicles, but they were servicing them a lot. But in those days, we had carburetors, so we had these veteran carburetor guys that overhauled carburetors, and it was a big deal. And here comes fuel injection. So here comes the CFI first, and then the multi-port. And these old guys who were overhauling carburetors had no interest in learning it. And so here are these young guys going, yeah, I'll learn that. And this is the beginning of fuel injection. And here we are now, fast forward to the EVs. And
I know. I was going to say, isn't there some similarities there?
Amazing.
There had to be some guys like, oh, this EFI stuff, it's not really going to catch on. Like, I mean, what do I got to like? Somebody must have been saying that, were they not?
Oh, absolutely. I remember, I'm at a Ford store and SBDS comes out, this massive piece of equipment that was all about diagnosing and tracing opens and shorts and all the things now within that. And these guys are like, I just want to adjust the float on my carburetor and lean it out or fix the choke. I don't want to learn that. And so it was amazing. By the end of the 80s, these young guys were absolutely killing it. And the carburetor guys were gone. Faded away.
My dad was one of those carburetor guys, right? Like he had it was a 78 Skylark with 460 in it.
Oh, and my.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like, just,
you know how light that vehicle is?
Oh man, and this thing would just like it would peel rubber out like all day long. Like the biggest motor they could find, they shoved into it. But he would just kind of sit there with his ears and just go, "Oh yeah, okay. Now I know what I need to adjust, right?" Or almost do like the Jedi. I'll put my hand on the hood. Yeah, it's the back fourth cylinder. Yeah, it's misfiring. You know what I mean? Like, and then of course, so that's so cool, man. You've seen it all. You've seen it all. You saw that big transition. You went through some gas crisis. You've gone through recessions. You've really seen a lot in this business. So that's why I'm super excited about really kind of getting into some of our topics. And sure enough, that is start talking about technicians. That's kind of one of our first topics, right? Is how to retain technicians without giving away the bank. And what a timely topic. Now, I'm curious though, this topic must have come to your mind because of a specific story. And I've heard a lot of stories out there. So I'm just kind of curious, how did this topic kind of bounce up for you? And, what was that driving force?
So we've seen it happen in the last couple of years a lot, right, Jason, where technicians suddenly were, for a long time, probably underpaid based on market value. And so in 23 especially, but even as it drifted into 24, we saw technicians now starting to demand high flat rate amounts, right? And they shopping themselves, and they're they're realizing that they were available to get this higher rate. And so there was a lot of movement. And so you were losing techs that frankly didn't have an issue with you. They liked being there, but suddenly they were demanding $10 more in a flat rate. And you went, wow, that's not typically something we've ever done. And so this was a radical change that took place in our industry, and it did allow a lot of movement with technicians. But it was really interesting. The good run shops, the ones that were producing high amounts of customer pay business, they were the ones that even if they lost a tech, it seemed like a month later, 6 weeks later, they're drifting back and they're saying, okay, yeah, the flat rate was great. I loved my new flat rate amount, but I couldn't get any hours. I couldn't get anything sold. I couldn't get anything to be able to be productive. And it turns out because of their lack of leadership or lack of structure in the service department, they were scrambling to get 30, 40 hours in a week when they were used to getting 60 and 70. And
do you think it's a structure thing? Like, do you think, I'm just curious, because like by the way, I find rabbit holes sometimes and I like going down rabbit holes. So like, I mean, do you think it's a structure thing, or is it really just, I'm going to say kind of a lack of experience and understanding what the real objectives are? And the reason I say this is because I heard a stat from a good friend of mine who runs, one of the largest employment, agencies for automotive, right? And the stat that he recently shared with me is like the average service manager right now has less than 5 years of experience. And I was like, really? And I guess maybe because, and I think back and I'm like, okay, actually, you know what? COVID did kind of create a reset on that. And I do know a lot of people that had been in the business for a long time. That was the time they decided to kind of get out of it. Right. So I'm curious, just your perspective. Is it lack of experience right now?
First of all, that's an amazing stat, right? And I hadn't heard that, but it does make sense because COVID did drive a lot of senior guys. And typically what you would have in a dealership is you have a guy saying, hey, within the next year, I'm going to retire. Fine. Let's start to groom your replacement, right? That's just a natural progression that typically would happen, whether it's through the tech or a service advisor getting promoted. But that's so interesting that it's 5 years or less. What we find in many cases is the advisor or the technician that's done an outstanding job, very committed, been with the company a long time, hardworking, gets that opportunity to be promoted. But they don't always get trained in the areas that they aren't good at. So if it's a technician, what they end up having is a tech that'll end up staying in the shop. He moves those production through the shop. He's handling problem vehicles, but he ends up hanging out a lot in the shop because that's his area of expertise and his comfort. The flip side is the advisor, and that he never gets into the shop to realize some of the crisis and some of those things. So the failure to train in the areas that they lack an experience early on puts a service manager into a routine that is innocent, but is in fact lacking focus in an area that probably needs the most focus, whether it's customer engagement in the write-up area, it's chaotic up there, or whether it's a writer that's promoted and now they don't get into the shop and realize that the shop is way behind in vehicles moving through. The dispatching system is erratic and maybe favors some guys. So you have guys standing around, other guys got 9 jobs sitting on their workbench, deciding which one they want to work on.
While the other one's fiddling their fingers. No, I'm with you on this, and I gotta be honest with you. I'd actually fall into this category, right? When I first Don, I'm gonna admit something to you that I probably haven't admitted to many people. All right, I think ever on this podcast, actually. Look, when I became a service manager for the first time, I was a dick. I'm going to tell you right now, Don, I was a dick. Look, I didn't know, right? Like no one told me I had to go. I was a service advisor. So my path was service advisor, service manager, right? Like a fair, to your point, it's like sometimes it's a technician moving up, then it's a service advisor moving up. For me, it was a service advisor. I moved into a service manager position, right? No one told me I had to be a leader. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that. Like no one told me I had to be one. I just kind of watched what my old service manager did, and he was very religious about telling everyone to shut up and get back to work. So I assumed that's how you treated your technicians.
Oh, yeah.
And and maybe because he had been there for a long time, he was able to say things like that and get away with it. I don't think anybody, by the way, should ever say that. But I'm just saying, like, maybe. So I lost technicians. I mean, immediately within like 3 months of me being there. Like, I think I had a mutiny in the back, man, because I was just like, I don't understand what these people's problem is. All they need to do is just and get back to work. That's all they need to do. I don't understand why this is a difficult thing.
So all the quality of write-up issues and all the things that were driving them nuts.
Oh, wow. It's just,
that's not our fault.
but to your point, and that's what I really wanted to drive home for anybody out there watching and listening right now. I mean, I think what Don's saying here, and I just really wanted to drive home that point, is that a lot of people get into this position and we're not trained. I mean, like, could I write a beautiful RO? Oh, hell yeah, I could. Like, could I translate what the needs of the customer were over to the technician? Oh, absolutely. I was amazing at that, right? But then all of a sudden I was in charge of like 36 people. What the hell were these people thinking? Anyways, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on it. Do you believe is that one of the reasons why we're also not able to retain, good staff? Because maybe we're not trained, one, to be a leader, and then two, actually be a business owner and actually understand how to operate the business. Anyways, I'd like to get your thoughts.
Well, I think you're exactly right. So that is so common when I go into dealerships, is that by the time you actually have a conversation with a service manager, he goes, "Hey, I was never taught this." So now from a consultant standpoint where your starting point is in just this idea of how to understand, what does leadership do? What should I be looking at? How should my conversations go with either an advisor or a technician? And so leadership is incredibly important because everybody yearns for structure. No matter how much of an independent guy a tech might be and some monster guy that can just gobble up work. But they like structure. They like to be able to understand what their day is going to happen. And then they want to just be able to move through it. They understand there's emergencies that happen, but for the most part, they know what they want to do and they want to move through it. So we have to create that structure. One of the biggest reasons technicians literally start shopping, this idea of, I wonder what else is in the marketplace and I wonder if I can get more money, can be that chaos and that stress that happens nothing more than they're getting interrupted throughout the day. So what is the main reason I believe that technicians start looking is that there isn't enough customer pay business to offset that very difficult diagnostics that happen. So, we have these veteran guys, and they truly are good at diagnosing difficult problems. But, we might authorize an hour to diagnose a check engine light, and they're 45 minutes into it, and they realize that it's much deeper. It's a wiring problem. It's an open, it's a short, it's in a data bus line. And now I'm really digging deep. Do they sometimes stop and say, I need an additional 3 hours authorized, or they just keep going? Well, most of the guys with a lot of pride, they just keep going. And so here we are 3 hours into a job, and now just discovering what the real problem is. And now they have to try to sell that with a writer. The customer declines the work, and now all that lost productivity. So when you're only diagnosing and repairing what customers are bringing it in for, and very little of that additional needed services through the multi-point inspection, the end result is that it's just hard to be 100% productive or 110% productive. It's just hard. And God forbid you do a lot of warranty work.
You're doing it with your, well, you end up doing it with your arm, with one hand tied behind your back, right?
Yes.
And something you said, and I wanted to go, because I know where you're going with this, and I do want to go down your rabbit hole because I can already see it in your head where you're going with this, and I love it. But one of the other things, it's like, not only and it does come, a lot of I think the retention of technicians does have a lot to do with the leadership and the management of it, right? But again, when I got thrown into no one told me they told me I had to be a manager, which I had a horrible example of what that actually looked like, right? And then, I figured it out. I had a mentor come in, tell me I needed to be a leader and kind of do that. But the third thing they didn't tell me, and I had to find this out myself too, is I actually had to grow this business. Like, What the hell? You know what I mean? Like,
Wait, you're being judged on that.
Like, what? Like, I actually, the expectation was I also had to grow this business. And again, going back to retaining my technicians, if I don't got the work, so now I had to be everything as a leader, right? I had to be a leader. I had to have empathy and listen to people cry their soup all day long. Right? Not only that, I had to manage, just the back and the forth and everything, the front of the house and the back of the house and the fires and everything going to that. At the same time, I also had to figure out how to grow that business, right? And like, look, we put people in these positions. We don't give them the training and consulting they need to actually be able to execute it. We're setting people up for failure. Now, speaking of failure, I see where you're going with what you're talking about there. And that's, I think we're kind of getting into the dispatching, right? It's like, how are we setting the technician up for success? Right? Like, so that's going to be my question for you. How dispatching can always like stay like one step ahead of the technician, and how do we kind of make that more of a linear experience versus the typical ping pong effect that we normally see?
Yeah, it's a great question. And before I jump right into that, I do want to say just that this customer pay business is the secret sauce to retain it. So if they're going to do the MPI, it's got to get sold up front. So at the end of the day, I want to have a really highly trained service advisor that knows how to not just present additional needed services, whether it's strictly based on the manufacturer, if some shops are that way, and that's fine, but they still got to close that deal. And they've got to be able to have the customer be inspired to get all the work done, right? I have to turn I got to produce customer pay hours that offset the diagnostic stuff enough that I can be 130, 140% productive and feel good about working here. I don't want to go someplace else and hope that they've got as good of a gig as I have here. So I'm going to work really hard on having a service advisor have enough ability and talent and confidence and word tracks to close as much as we possibly can, and then even follow up with the client so that the techs always have that customer pay business. Now, I will tell you, here you got all this business, and then you have this issue of actual dispatching, right? There's so many systems out there for dispatching, whether it's centralized, whether it's the computer that dispatches the work, or whether it's simple groups, lateral supports, teams, this ultimate way of sharing hours. All these are great systems. But what we have to focus on in management is anticipating when a tech is going to be done and what's his next job. A good friend of mine, Telly Williams, says it's hours, hours, hours. I'm going to concentrate on exactly how many hours I can get out of that technician. So to do that, I'm removing all possible roadblocks. I always want to be a job or two ahead of him on what he's getting next. There's so many dispatching systems where the tech walks up finally and he tosses the RO and he says, "This one's all done. You got something for me?" And the dispatcher goes, "Hang on a second. Let me see what I can find." "Really? Let me see what I can find." "Go have a seat on your bench. I'll try to get something to you." None of that makes sense. So a really good dispatching system that a manager needs to implement is, how much time do you need to get this job completed? Are there parts available? All the things that would go into a job that's been diagnosed, been sold, and now I just need to get the work done. That's great. How much time do you need to get that done? And by the way, when you ask that question, a technician will always tell you, "Give me 2 hours, give me 3 hours, I should be all set." Okay, I've got 3 hours to find him his next job. Now in the morning when it's busy, no big deal. But Jason, mid-afternoon and it's starting to get thin.
No, look, I'm with you. I've seen this play out. I've seen the exact same thing play out too often. And you said something earlier, and I think it's, good shops make time for warranty. Do you know what I mean? Like, good shops make time for it. And this is one of the things I see. Honestly, I don't see it enough, right? It is like we get so focused on that CP that we are not giving the technician any time, all right, to actually diagnose or look for the warranty. And it's like and just because, they came out on this particular recall, I mean, look, a good advisor knows that, hey, if that recall is on that upper strut, well, I know for a fact that if I get that upper strut on there, I can also, get the recall, or I can also claim the other side of it at the exact same time, so I don't have an alignment issue, and I can actually claim the alignment to go along with it too. It's this orchestra, right? And the amount of data, the amount of information that an advisor needs today, like honestly, dude, I don't know if I could go back and do that thing, right? Because, like,
That's
I mean,
true.
it's like to really truly be effective, like I need to know about 16 different things, on almost every different car, on almost every single car that's coming in, to really kind of capitalize not only on the CP opportunity, but also capitalize on the warranty opportunity. But I'm curious though, like, what do you see the best operators out there? How do they balance that out, and how are they intentional about it? I guess you've seen some great examples, I'm sure of it.
Yeah. So the old computers dispatching to work, I've never seen it work. It's just too easy to manipulate. Centralized dispatch is fine. The problem is you end up in many cases with personality conflicts. Some guys end up relying on technicians to bail them out, so they feed them, and then the other ones get the scraps. So even that can be challenging. The best ones seem to be the groups. And I find simple groups to be the best, where a writer has his 3 technicians and he knows how much they can produce that day, he knows how much he has to sell. We count hours. We know what the goal is every day. We know what each individual technician's goal. We know what's being carried over at the end of the day. We really concentrate then on a simple group would have a technician and a writer, and they would actually be setting a daily goal of how many hours that group is going to produce. And the writer's job is to have the amount of work sold and coming in every day to meet that hour's goal. So now it becomes more of a machine-like attitude. It doesn't become this personality. And now it's just moving through the day, chunk, chunk, chunk. Now the writer is going to ask a very important question to the technician. How much time do you have left on this job? Why? Because I need to know how to move through the other jobs that need to get done. Technicians will always stop what they're doing and take care of a waiter if they're told that that's going to happen. So, hey, at 10 o'clock, I'm going to stop you and I'm going to have you bang out this waiter, and then you can get back on this job. No problem. I'll take the money. But don't walk up and say, hey, can you stop what you're doing? And can you bang this out real fast? No, I'm in the middle of this, So these are all the really good
that pod format must help.
Understanding.
Like that I'm seeing the pod format. I like where I like where you're going with the pod format, and I know what you're saying. I've seen it now a few times too, right? Where it's like, okay, so I'm responsible for these 3, 4, 5 techs, right? And as an advisor, it's my responsibility to fill their hours, But now having that responsibility, that pod does allow me to balance a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like, have you seen more of a better balance with that type of model?
Well, I think what really happens is they come in already knowing what they have to get done. Typically, you're going to have a mid-morning meeting where you're going to just check in with the 3 techs. You're going to review what's still coming in. You're going to review how it's moving through. But here's what's really powerful is you're giving now real estimated time of completions to customers. The one thing that they demand almost more than anything else is, when am I going to get my car back? And instead of a superficial, well, we should have it this afternoon, which is crazy, because at 1 o'clock they start calling, seeing if the car is done. And this afternoon to you is 5 o'clock. So we want to give real estimated times of completion when we're vehicles being dropped off. And we can do that because why? We have a complete understanding of how we're going to move through the day. So we have a high level of preparation with my work orders. You mentioned very early on about the quality of the write-up. Oh my goodness, that is everything when it comes to derailing productivity is 100%. A poor quality write-up. So we're going to have a really high level quality write-up, and then we're going to make sure we're moving through it. Now, centralized dispatching, other systems work fine. They just take more managing. It's a more hands-on managing approach than, say, lateral supports, simple groups. And then, of course, ultimately, you don't see it often, but teams are a phenomenal way, because if you're actually sharing hours on a team, it's incredible how productive that team can gobble up work. It's impressive.
Here's the thing I found also with that team, and I'm with you. Like, not only are they going to gobble up the work, but I also find, and this is probably a perfect segue kind of into our conversation about measuring the quality of MPI, I have found it to be better in that model, right? Like, there seems to be like I don't know, the experience, the flow of information going back is a little more freer. I'm with you. One of the first shops I worked in was within a tower situation, and now even going into a digital, version dispatching of that, right? Like there's a chunkiness. There's that ping pong, right? Like bang over here, bang back up to you, like just you're right in that, but I'd love to if you see the same thing, but I believe in the kind of that model. I think we can actually get a more of a quality MPI, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's hard to implement some of these types of strategies in smaller shops. As soon as you get to a bigger shop, I had one shop that I had 19 techs and 21 bays. Nobody got 2 bays, right?
Yeah.
And so they would have the car in the air and a car underneath, right? And things of that nature. And nobody complained and nobody left me because of one reason. We had so much work, and we had taken this company and shrunk it into a writer and 3 techs, a writer and 4 techs, depending on the quality of the writer. Now, that means you have to have a high quality writer to get that done, advisor to get that done. But I think once dispatching is structured and it's a machine-like attitude and we're focused on hours, now as a manager, I'm finding myself way less involved in problems. And
Yes.
now I can start to
Gives you
concentrate
the
on
time
what
to
you just
focus
mentioned,
on that. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this quality of this MPI.
Mhm.
We asked for the MPI to be done. It's great to see this new video series on it now. I think that's impressive. It takes me back to 1979, to be honest with you, where the tech, sometimes the cars never made it to the bay. They were up in the air, and the tech had the customer under the car, and he'd wave me over with a clipboard, and he'd go, "Okay, we got a leaking pinion seal, we got a leaking crank seal here," and then he'd say, "What are you bringing in for? A stalling? Yep, we'll fix the stalling problem too." I mean,
Right? Yeah.
this is what technicians did in those days.
Yeah.
And so this idea of the video is pretty powerful. I like it. I still think it needs to move through the advisor. We don't want to send it directly to the customer. I want the advisor to walk through what he's seen, so they don't have the quick no button on the phone.
I'm glad you said that, because like not for nothing, but there's some amazing technicians out there, and truly amazing technicians that have no tact whatsoever. Like absolutely none. And I've
None.
seen some of the videos out there. Man, I put my hands over my face, go, what would you send that to a customer? But I'm with you. It does kind of need to go through the filter. It kind of needs to go through the lens of that service advisor, because they are the ones that have built the rapport. There are things that advisor knows, maybe about that individual, maybe about their previous servicing, or maybe about even what their goals are of the vehicle moving forward. That there's a lens that the service advisor has. So I'm with you on that. I do believe I love the video products. I do. But I'm with you. I think it needs to go through that lens of the service advisor. Sorry. Anyways, go ahead. Continue.
Well, so I wrote a book not too long ago, and in the book, I talk about this idea of the quality of MPI. I'm at a really large store, 45 technicians, and one of the things we noticed was the variance in the quality of the MPI. And we knew that because the product we were using at the time, you could run a report to see all the cautions and fails for the entire month of each technician. And you could see where one technician had worked on 70 cars and he had cautioned 23 brakes and failed 11 of them. And the guy right next to him, who also worked on 68 cars, had cautioned 7 and failed 2 on the brakes. Why? He didn't like to do brakes. So I remember the way we decided to really try to understand it is we ended up with a contest. We said, "Hey guys, we're going to do a contest, and you guys will judge it. We're going to bug a used car, and I want every tech over the next week to perform an MPI on it, multi-point inspection, right? And I want you to look at the cautions and the fails." And so off they went, and there was a nice prize. By the way, when it was done, it was a good prize, and so everybody was motivated to do it. We ended up with 45 different multi-point inspections. There were no 2 multi-point inspections identical. And you go, how does that happen? It had 110,000 miles. There were some things that were worn along with some things that didn't work. We bugged it with a few more things. But that was our beginning to understand that I need to start to, once I have everybody doing the multi-point inspection, then I really want to look at the quality of the
Exactly.
multi-point inspection, the cautions along with the fails. And I personally believe the cautions are as powerful as the failures. You got an oil leak, you got an oil leak. But that drive belt
Mhm.
needs to start to talk about, hey, we got to start thinking about that. Or, those types of front suspension components that over time definitely have play, but guys don't necessarily
Especially
like
once
to
I
do
know.
suspension, so they're not cautioning, right?
And look, when I was a service advisor, there were definitely things I knew about specific vehicles. So even if it didn't come back on the MPI, I'm like, look, I know this car. Okay, I've seen this happen consistently right at the 50,000 mile mark. All right, just it's not coming up right now, but let's just be prepared so the next time that I do have this conversation with you. Look, as an advisor, the MPI is one of the most important things for me because it allows, and I'm with you. The caution items for me as an advisor is what I look for, right? Because I want to front load this customer so that the next time they come in, all right, it's like I'm done. I gotta be honest with you though. I can't tell you how many times I've seen an MPI done, and it literally just like, here you go, Mr. Customer.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like
Oh,
I'm just like,
100%.
what the hell are you doing? Like it's just like it's just stapled. It was like, oh, we did this. I'm gonna staple it to your RO. You know what I mean? Like there's like no time, nothing. Here's the thing. I guess, and I'm sure you've seen this too, right? Like the best operators I've seen out there have this mindset of intentionality that is just contagious across everything, right? It's like, I mean, just you're intentional about creating this MPI. And I'm with you because I also see patterns too, right? If the same guy provides me 23 of them back and I'm looking, I'm going, God, wow, these all look very similar to each other, like how much time is put into it. So I'm with you on that. But like, I guess my question is for you is like, how do we get that mindset of just, let's be intentional. We got this information. Let's create an experience. Let's be intentional about it. You've seen this play out where it's been incredibly successful, but how do we get it? How do we execute that consistently?
So I think first we're going to critique those MPIs, right? We're going to
Sure.
have that conversation. Hey, it's got 110,000 miles and it's all green. Really? You know
Really?
what I mean? And so I'm going to do that one-on-one. I'm never going to call somebody out in front of everybody, but I
Mhm.
definitely want on a monthly basis to look and see what were the trends, what was really happening. So I need to review MPIs and I need to have that because I want to put the writer, the advisor in a position to be successful. I
100%.
want to put them in a position where they have something to talk about. Now, I think you brought up a great point. This idea of the work's done, the customers pick up the car, and I'm not going to do an active delivery. I'm
Right?
not going to talk about everything we found today on this MPI. And as you can see, there's a lot of green, but there was a couple of items that we talked about. You decided to hold off on them. Let's put together a plan to get that back in and get that done before winter. Let's do this over the next month and a half, 2 months, whatever it might be. And if they believe it needs to be done, they just couldn't that day, their time or money, that's fine. These people appreciate that, but to not have the conversation and
Right?
hand them the repair order and let them deal with what they're looking at is unfortunately commonplace. And all you have to do as a service manager, service director, fixed ops, or general manager is watch. You
Well,
watch
you're right. It's a leadership.
active delivery
Mhm.
process towards the end of the day, and you see paperwork being handed out and no conversation about the MPI. And by the way, MPIs today are electronically done, right?
Sure.
Where they sent them to their cell phone. That's great. But I want to have the conversation. I want to pull
Exactly.
that up and say, here's what we sent you earlier. Let's talk about it and have the customer pull up their phone, click on the MPI one more time, and now let's walk through these cautions. And what's our plan to go ahead and get those accomplished
Well, and
is
and and
incredibly
I think
powerful.
I think like good leaders out there are ensuring that there is time slotted for that, right? I mean, how many times have you I mean, I'm sure you've heard it because I know I've heard it a bunch of times. Well, I don't have time. They don't give me time for that. Or the worst thing of all when I hear that's not really a part of my pay plan.
Oh my.
Whoa, okay. I'll stop there because that's probably a whole podcast in itself, and I might get a little worked up about it. Look, Don, I know we're getting towards the tail end of our time, and I feel like we probably need to do like a whole another one of these because I feel like we touched a little bit on everything, but I still think there's probably some more for us to go through. But Don, before I let you go though, for like everybody out there watching and listening right now who maybe would like to connect with you and, maybe continue some of these conversations. Cause I definitely think there's more conversation to be had on just, anything from MPI to the dispatching and to best practices of retaining technicians. What's the best way to connect with you, Don, so we can kind of continue some of this conversation?
Yeah, I think my website, which is autosctconsulting.com, autosctconsulting.com, does have a lot of information. There's a media page in there where I have a lot of conversations about techniques for advisors and building confidence with them, structure, processes. I've got a book page because in writing that book on why auto service departments fail to grow, there's a great page there that talks about the book and the leaders in the industry that made recommendations in the book. So I'm excited about that. But it will give you some groundwork as a general manager, as an owner, to start to understand what the good stores are doing, and then more importantly, how am I addressing this money left on the table? I think, Jason, at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. What frustrates us sometimes as consultants is, do you realize how much money was left on the table today? Yeah. Well, a good store can close 30% of their MPIs. A monster store can close 50% of the additional needed services that are found. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of money that we want to have a plan to loop back in. And who doesn't love sold work coming in the door? Certainly technicians that don't have to wait for an authorization. They can literally just get the work done that was sold from a previous MPI. Now you got happy technicians. Now you have service advisors making a lot of money. And so the end result is that now you're growing, which I love what you said earlier about the service manager. Suddenly you were told you have to grow it. Really?
Yeah, but you know what though? I also find you also get better customers. You get happier customers.
Oh
right?
My God.
Like, because I mean, look, I'm a customer. I own too many vehicles outside. All right. Like I hate taking my car in for service. Why? But when I think about like, why do I really hate it? Because I just don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to go in and it's going to be a $100 bill, or I'm going to go in and it's going to be a $3,000 bill. And taking this time and front loading, and to your point, scheduling out maybe some of these cautionary items that is going to have to be addressed next time, right? Like that just creates like, I know I'm coming at, yes, I remember we talked about that last time. I remember it's $600. Yep. Anyways, it's
that easy. Yes.
Experience. It makes it better for everyone, but we have to give ourselves the time to do it. And we have to have that mindset about being intentional to create this type of experience. Look, Don, I've had so much fun jamming with you today, and I'm sure there's going to be another time that we're going to do this. Any final thoughts before I let you go for everybody out there watching and listening?
Well, thanks again for the invite. I appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. And I will tell you, let's invest into those managers. Let's leadership. Teach them what they don't know. You hired a great person. You promoted a hardworking, dedicated person, but they need to be taught leadership. They need to be taught what they don't know. And then they'll be successful and everybody wins. So yeah, that's probably my best thought, is invest into some leadership.
Absolutely. 100%. Hey, Don, really, really, really appreciate your time. For everybody out there watching and listening right now, the biggest compliment you can give myself or Don is share the show. Right? If you have a friend or a colleague or manager that needs to hear some part of today's conversation, I'm telling you, it means the world to us and is the biggest compliment you can ever get, to share the show. Again, Don, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Everybody out there watching, listening, y'all have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy with Jason podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe.